So finally, the final speaker needs no introduction. It's our own Swami Tattwamayananda. He will be speaking on the evolution of interfaith relationships and the vision of spiritual convergence and world peace. However, it's obligatory for me to give a bit of background on Swami Tattwamayananda for at least a few first-timers here and who are not aware. Swami Tattwamayananda is the ministry in charge of our Vedanta Society of Northern California, headquartered in San Francisco. Before coming to US in 2012, Swami Tattwamayananda served in several centers of the Ramakrishna order in India as an editor, publisher, teacher of Sanskrit, and instructor in Advaitic philosophy and Indian scriptures. More particularly, he taught at the monastic training center at the Belur Mutt, the headquarters of the Ramakrishna mission in India, where monks of the order received their spiritual education. His lectures span a remarkable range. I've personally benefited the last 10 years listening and reflecting on his lectures on Upanishads, Viveka Patanjali Yoga Sutra, and Buddhism, and several topics. And not only listening, as we discussed earlier, that reflecting and doing his Q&A sessions. And many of us here can vouch for this, that we have personally benefited from his guidance, clarity, and ability. And most importantly, he's a mentor for many of us. With that, I'm deeply grateful to have Swami Tattwamayananda speak and guide us today.
Yonda pravishya mamavachamimam prasuptam sanjeevayadi akhila shakti dharaswadhamna anyamsya hastacharana sravanatvagadin pranan namo bhagavate purushaya tubhyam. My greetings to Dr. Professor Indranil Sengupta and my close admirer, and I have the privilege to attend the the San Francisco Interfaith Council programs on a few occasions. Dr. Michael Pappas and, of course, Sanjay Marimadaya is our own close devotee and a student of Vedanta. I'm afraid the title of the lecture itself sounds like a short lecture. It's a fairly long sentence. So when you talk about the evolution and history or the very concept of interfaith spirituality, you have to travel backward for several millennia. If you go to San Francisco City, there is an old Hindu temple, maybe the oldest Hindu temple outside of Asia, the Hindu Temple of San Francisco, which is located at the junction of Webster and Filbert Streets. On Filbert Street's entrance, you can find an inscription, which is perhaps the oldest and the most ancient statement on interfaith relationship. The statement is this: Ekam Sat Vipra Bhagudha Vadanti. It's a very ancient statement from Rigveda Samhita, the first mandala of 164th Sukta. But it means is, truth is one, but sages call it by different names, understand by different names, experience differently, but the truth is one. It is only one aspect of a much longer statement. Indram mitram varunam maktiraku atho divyasa suparno garutman ekam sat vipra bhagudha vadanti aktim yamam matrishwanamahu. Means different names of gods and goddesses, but people realize it. People who are pure in their heart, pure in their intentions, through meditation, through spiritual discipline, they realize it differently in different cultures. different traditions like Philokalia, which Dr. Pappas was referring to, in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, or even the way of a pilgrim, or in the New Testament parables and Sermon on the Mount, or Buddhist and the Buddhist scriptures, Dhammapada, or the Zoroastrian Siddhavasta, or in Jewish Talmud and other religious textbooks. The same truth is described, defined, explained in different vocabularies, different languages, in different parables, in different analogies, but reality is one. This statement is very important for America. You know why it's important? The same idea was for the first time proclaimed in 1893 in the first Parliament of Religion held in Chicago, where Vivekananda came as a delegate of Hinduism. He articulated the same truth. In fact, the Rigvedic statement goes back to 4th millennium BC. That statement was again re-articulated and rediscovered intellectually for the first time on a Western platform in America, in a landscape prepared and enriched by Emerson, Thoreau, Whitman, and other transcendentalists who prepared the background for the first Parliament of Religion. I read in Gargi's books that the very idea of the first Parliament of Religion in 1893 came from one of the transcendentalists who had a long discussion with Dr. Henry Barrows, who is the editor of the 2-volume series, The Proceedings of the First Parliament of Religion, 2 huge volumes, which one of America's presidents, I think maybe the last president, perhaps Barack Obama, presented to Prime Minister Modi when he visited this country. This the original edition of the proceedings of the first Parliament of Religion. You know why it is so historically important? That higher idea of interspirituality and interfaith relationship was for the first time historically proclaimed by a great Indian emperor in 261 BC, the great Ashoka the Great. He was a warlike emperor who waged a big war, Kalinga War, in 261 BC. And when he saw the destruction of this huge war, these bloody battles fought in so many different places, he became a convert to Buddhism, and he adopted Buddhist religious tradition. And he was the first one historically to bring on the same platform the representatives of different denominations of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, which actually was slightly older than Buddhism, and different other cults and groups which are prevailing in the Indian subcontinent in the 3rd century BC, Emperor Ashoka. So if you look at India's national flag, you can see the Ashoka Chakra, a wheel, Dharma wheel, which reminds us of this great transformation of a warlike emperor into a Buddhist monk. The second effort, it was a very partial, a very lopsided effort, goes to the credit of another emperor, Emperor Akbar, who in 1582 convened a meeting of different religious traditions that prevailed in India in 16th century. He brought some Jesuit priests from Goa and Hindu priests, Hindu scholars, Sufi scholars, some Muslim scholars, Buddhist Jains, and Jewish scholars from Kerala. I remember something very interesting. The first migration of Jewish community to India took place in the 4th century BC, which is recorded. But if you believe the legend, it had happened even the time of King Solomon the Great in 9th or 8th century BC. So Emperor Akbar brought these Jewish rabbis from Cochin to Delhi court, and Jesuit priests from Goa, Christians, Jesuit priests, and Arab scholars, Jains and Buddhists. And he articulated some kind of a syncretic religion, means borrowing ideas from different traditions, kind of religious syncretism. It's called Deen Ilahi, the divine faith. That was historically the second effort to create some kind of an interfaith movement. The third effort happened in America, in the new continent, in 1893. As part of America's celebration of the 400th anniversary of Columbus' discovery of the new continent, a huge assembly of faith leaders belonging to Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu, Jain, and different denominations of Christian faith systems were assembled in Chicago in 1893. So Dr. Henry Barrows, who was the chairman of the religious committee meeting, it was a huge organization representing different delegates from different faith systems. Henry Barrows is chairman, and he had edited and published 2 huge volumes. In that you can find hundreds of lectures published by Dr. Henry Barrows, which are transcripts of different lectures delivered during that occasion. One man is remembered, the only speaker who is still spoken about, referred to from among the different delegates who participated in that program, in the Chicago Parliament of Religion, is Vivekananda. And who came to this country without any recommendation. And still, Henry Barrows, in his writings, he refers again and again to the impact of this great monk who was Swami Vivekananda, who actually came to this very place. He stayed in a forest area nearby, 5 miles away from here. He spent 15 days meditating in Samuel Taylor Park. 16 Americans followed him. So America has the credit of organizing the first interfaith program in modern history, in modern times. Now, if you look at the spiritual convergence, frequently, spirituality is defined by Vivekananda as some kind of a higher transcendental experience that goes beyond religion itself. So normally when you talk about religion, what comes to our mind is a set of rituals, books, sermons, external practices. But Vivekananda said that religion is important, but religion is important only when it eventually takes you to spiritual experience, going beyond faith, belief, rituals, doctrines and dogmas. Finally, when you reach that higher spiritual experience, then only God becomes a reality in our life. And then every word becomes a prayer, every thought becomes a meditation. Our entire life gets spiritualized because we realize that God is not confined to a place of worship, a temple or a church or a synagogue. God exists outside the place of worship also. I tell you something interesting. The most well-known definition of a devotee of God Hindu scriptures is something like this. Sarva bhudeshu ye paschet bhagavad bhavam atmanaha bhudani bhagavadi atmani esha bhagavadottamaha. The meaning is this. Who is the highest devotee? There's a big debate going on in the Bhagavata Purana, one of our philosophical works. So one king, enlightened king, puts a question to a sage. Who is the highest devotee of God? One may perhaps imagine that somebody who goes to a church or a temple or a synagogue or Buddhist place of worship and reads scriptures every day, who fasting every day, he's a devotee. But no. Lord Krishna, who is the embodiment of the divine in Bhagavad Purana, he says, a person who experiences the presence of God in everyone, in everything, and the presence of everything and everyone in God is the highest devotee. That is the true meaning of spirituality. And that's the true meaning of spiritual convergence. This is often explained in the light of two important illustrations in Hindu scriptures. One is an illustration, something like somebody who is trying to climb the top of a hill. Suppose you are trying to climb to the top of a hill. When you begin your hiking your journey at the bottom of the hill, you don't see anyone else around you. You're the only traveler. No, there's no one visible anywhere. As you move further and further upward, then you start realizing, well, there are some other people also who are also trying to climb to the top of the hill from different angles. But you don't realize that at the beginning of the journey. You don't see anyone else trying to climb. But when you climb and move forward, upward, then you find there are others who are also trying to climb the top of hill. And as you go upward and upward, you find more and more people are trying to climb to the top of a hill. When you reach the top of the hill, you find there are so many people, infinite number of people, trying to reach to the top of the hill from infinite angles, infinite number of roads, pathways, hiking roads, which people are following to reach the top of the hill. The top of the hill is spiritual experience. Michael Pappas was referring to St. Francis, city of St. Francis. St. Francis was an example, good example. So wherever you find a sage or a saint or a spiritual person who has transcended religion and who has reached spirituality, that is the ultimate goal of spiritual life. I am reminded of a very explosive, almost radical statement from Vivekananda's complete works. It's very interesting. He says, what about non-believers? Somebody like Buddha, let's say, Buddha did not affirm his belief in a creator God. Hitler believed in God. He was Catholic. Can you say Hitler was more spiritual than Buddha? Nobody will say that unless he wants to be certified by psychiatrists. The reality is, if one can be spiritual, it means becoming a good human being. So Vivekananda says, you live your life in such a way that God will accept you even if you don't accept Him. Now what it means is, spirituality is all about life, the way we talk, the way we interact with human beings, our compassion, broad-mindedness, our understanding, and the idea that the whole world is one spiritual family. And incidentally, there's a statement in the Mahabharata. Ayam nija paro vedi gadana leghuchedasam udarat saridanam tu vasudha eva kudumbagam. The meaning is, this is mine, that's yours, you're wrong, I'm right. These are ideas, characteristics of people with low intelligence, low spiritual growth. the highest spiritual man, for him, Vasudha means the earth, humanity. Humanity is one spiritual family. In fact, that is the essence of the statement that I referred to earlier, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vadanti. In other words, becoming an ideal human being is the essence of spirituality. So in spiritual tradition, you can find this convergence of at different levels of convergence. One is intellectual recognition that no language fully captures the infinite. And that is a very interesting thing. If you define God, you are reducing God to the finite. You are limiting God. And you don't have to go to Vedanta to get this idea. Meister Eckhart, the great 13th century German mystic, was a Dominican priest. He was persecuted by the Franciscans, of course. And he said that it is a blasphemy to try to define God even as Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. It's not wrong, but the real God even transcends all definitions. Now, the idea is found in Vedanta. One of the central ideas of Vedanta, Advaita, which is the philosophical foundation of the unity and oneness of humanity. Spiritual unity and spiritual oneness of humanity is this. Like he says, the ultimate truth cannot be defined. You can worship God, you can pray to God, but eventually you should realize that God, as a divine spark, lives everywhere and in everyone, in everything. So that cannot be defined in words. If you define something, you are reducing it to the finite. God is the infinite. So one is, when you realize this infinite dimension of the divine, then all differences disappear. Jesus was born in Palestine. Buddha was born in Nepal, actually part of India at that time. And the great sages of India, Vedic times, were born in India. Jaina Vardhamana Mahavira was born in India. Buddha, again, Zoroaster was born in what is now Iran, at Persia at that time. The great Jewish prophets were born in Israel, Jerusalem, those Middle Eastern regions. So they spoke a different language. Each of them spoke in their own independent language. They used different parables, different illustrations, different languages. The dress code was different, food was different, a lot of socio-anthropological, cultural differences, diversities. But beyond and within all these differences, there is one divine reality. They all spoke about some universal spiritual truths. That is the real meaning of intellectual convergence. The second convergence happens, ethical. Certain moral, ethical values, nonviolence, ahimsa. You find this in the teachings of all the great prophets and religious teachers of different religious traditions. So intellectual and ethical. And then there is another one, spiritual. Actually, God becomes a reality in our life only when we reach that experience dimension of religion. It is not different from religion. Religion is very important. If you see, for example, two intellectual movements that have caused bloodshed, genocides, and massacres in the world. One is communism, the other is religion. Surprisingly, more wars were fought in the name of religion and for God than for anything else. That's because we try to reduce religion to some kind of empty practices and rituals. In casteism in India, that the crusades and then, of course, what is happening even now today, the tendency to give literal interpretation to every single word, every comma, saying that it comes from God. How can you insult God by saying that He has given one truth to one community and He has given falsehood to the rest of the humanity. You're actually reducing God to some kind of a very corrupt, prejudiced politician. If He's a God, He should be God of everyone or none. It's an important fact. So, the point is, you cannot love and worship God in a holy temple or any place of worship and then hate everyone outside. Actually, and if you claim to be a devotee of God, God will be very ashamed to come out because He'll be so much embarrassed to be worshipped by such people. So the Sri Ramakrishna says, if you believe in God, if you meditate on God, if you worship in God, at least try to give good name to Him when you come outside. Try to practice little bit of that meditative, contemplative attitude in your interaction with other fellow human beings. So that's why when you, surprisingly you find, basically I'm a Sanskritist, but I had access to many of the different areas about education. One, you'll be surprised when I tell you, as a monk, I'm a great admirer of Richard Dawkins. This gentleman, you cannot deny the fact he's a good human being. At least when he's taking room next to your apartment, you don't feel running away from there. Because he doesn't hate anyone. Only you don't find him criticizing Gandhi or Buddha. Never. And Buddha did not believe in God. Can you believe that? Buddha did not believe in God. But he's one of the greatest spiritual personalities the world has ever seen. So what it means is, what Vivekananda says is that spirituality transcends religion. And spirituality is nothing but universal spiritual humanism. Which means you have to understand that God lives in everyone, in everything. There is a great statement in one of our ancient scriptures. It comes in Gaudapada Karika. Please don't mind, I'm inflating upon you all the Sanskrit verses, because without the verses coming first, I cannot capture my thoughts. So siddhanta vyavasthasu doitino nischida dridham paraspara viruddhindi tairayabla viruddhindi. The meaning is this: people go on fighting in the name of God. But God is present in everyone. And there is no otherness. So if you try to hate anyone, you are hating yourself, because there is no anyone other than yourself. Spiritually, we are one. That is, from a spiritual perspective, humanity is one. But then there are differences. Differences are there. Pluralism is to be celebrated. Universal spirituality doesn't mean that one religion alone exists. Every religion is an expression of the same divine in different languages, different cultures, different socio-anthropological traditions. For example, I can give an example. I'm a vegetarian. So if I read Jesus Christ parable in distributing fish, but that is secondary. Buddha did not dress like Christ, and maybe Zoroaster did not dress like Christ. These dress codes, food, practices, illustrations, parables, these are different from tradition to tradition, but the same fundamental to non-violence, love, compassion, mercy, all these values you find in Christ and also in Buddha or any of these great teachers like Zoroaster or Jewish prophets, and also the ancient Vedic sages of India. I'm reminded of a very interesting incident in the life of Gandhi. Gandhi used to carry with him, he used to be regularly reading the Bible. When Vivekananda, who happens to be the founder of this the organization that we belong to, used to carry with him one book, that is the Imitation of Christ. He never moved anywhere without a small, tiny copy of the Imitation of Christ. He was a Hindu monk. And once it so happened that a few missionaries, very aggressive missionaries, they met Gandhi. And tried to convert him to Christianity. So he said, what do you mean by converting to Christianity? He said, it means following the path of Christ. He said, I'm already following the path of Christ. Because that's what my religion teaches me. I'm not baptized, but I'm actually following the path of Christ. When he was living in London as a student, something very interesting. It goes to credit of the Gandhi's, Gandhi's patron, a British lady, in her apartment he was living. Gandhi was interested in trying to become a British English gentleman. He wanted to learn French. And on the top of it, he wanted to dress like an English gentleman. Can you imagine Gandhi going like a dandy? And he was going to learn dancing, European dancing. Maybe very disturbing for you to look at. Then that English lady called Mr. Gandhi as they pronounce, don't do that. You have a great tradition, great culture. Why don't you stick to your own culture? Gandhi, that is a reforming effect on Gandhi, a transformative effect on Gandhi. So then Gandhi told this missionary, well, I'm already following the path of Christ because I'm reading Bhagavad Gita every day. And I think it was Stanley Jones, I think if I'm right, he's an Anglican missionary who was working in central provinces in India at that time. Anyway, he said, poor Gandhi, such a wise, wonderful man, but he'll go to hell because he's not a Christian. And after 10 years, after India got independence, he left and went back to England. Before returning to England, he said, I met only one Christian in India, that was Gandhi. So you can see the long distance he traveled. What it means is, if you try to be a real Hindu, you become a real Christian, a real Jewish person in the spiritual sense, or real Buddhist. So compassion, love, understanding, all these are common principles, ethical common principles in all tradition. So another very important illustration in the scriptures is found in the Rigveda Samhita, also found in Mundaka Upanishad. It's a verse, there's something like this. Yada nadyasyantamana samudre astam gacchandi nama rupe vihaya tata nama rupat vimuktaka parat param purusham ubayidi divyam. It's a meaning. It is some kind of an illustration, some kind of metaphor. So many rivers are flowing to the ocean. They become one with the ocean. When the waters empty, the rivers empty the waters in the ocean, they become one. They lose the individual identities. They become one with the ocean. So, what happens when a person begins his spiritual life? Well, I believe in this. Then he practices some do's and don'ts. He practices prayers every day, rituals every day. As he evolves further and further, God becomes more and more a real thing in his everyday life. But what happens is frequently that we try to, instead of spiritualizing our life, we secularize spirituality. What Vedanta tells you is this: every action is an act of worship. Every word is an act of prayer. Every thought is an act of meditation. Every moment is spiritual experience. But again, this is not a motto. This is something that we have to attain gradually, through gradual evolution. At the beginning of spiritual life, we believe certain things. We follow certain do's and don'ts, which are very, very important. You have to remember very carefully. Today, if you tell somebody, well, you don't have to believe in anything, you are already Buddha. You can be Buddha, but you have to go to kindergarten right now. Then after 30 years, you will go to university. So becoming a Buddha is making God a reality in our life. A reality that we experience every minute in our life. It's not like practicing meditation 2 hours in the morning, or maybe 1 hour in the morning, or 1 day in the whole week. That is not spirituality. So we begin with these disciplines. It's like kindergarten. We have to begin somewhere. Education has to begin somewhere. You are a baby, you go to the kindergarten. And gradually we evolve further and further. And as we go deeper and deeper, what happens is slowly we try to slowly spiritualize even our secular activities. So the difference between the secular and spiritual vanishes. Even the secular activities become spiritual. Cooking can be done in a spiritual manner. Just like meditation can be done in a spiritual manner. Any kind of activity can be an act of worship. At the beginning, work and worship. Maybe you may worship 1 week. 1 week, one day you worship, 6 days you work. Gradually what happens, work as worship. Slowly, we begin to evolve further and reach a stage where work itself becomes as sacred as worship. Eventually, every work becomes an act of worship. Then, there is no distinction between the secular work and the spiritual worship. I mean, every secular activity becomes spiritualized. At that stage, what happens? Convergence happens. Or secular activities themselves become spiritual activities. This happens to everyone. Normally, what happens? What stands in the way of this convergence is the historical wounds, memories, individual identities. Sometimes we are afraid that when we try to interpret religion as some kind of a universal spiritual idealism, we may lose our own individual identities as belonging to one specific religion. It doesn't happen that way. It happens when we define religion as a faith, as a doctrine, as a dogma. But when we move further, beyond doctrines and dogmas, when we evolve in spiritual life, slowly you find God becomes a reality. And then we'll find that even when you're working in your office, working in the university, working in the hospital, doing or engaging in the so-called secular activities, you can practice spirituality. That's the ultimate goal of human existence. Today, most of the problems are due to defining religion as doctrines and dogmas. So long as we limit religion to the status of doctrines and dogmas, there will be no end to conflicts. They become ideologies. They become just things that we want to propagate and identify with. But what really happens is, when we do that, our religious growth, spiritual growth also gets stranded. So, in one of our ancient tradition, there is an Upanishad called the Katha Upanishad. I shall give, it's a very interesting story, so maybe it's very interesting to focus on that. In one of our Upanishads, let's say one of our most philosophical books, Katha Upanishad, there's a story of a small child having a dialogue with an angel. So I'm trying to put in Western language. Angel means Yama. We call it like an angel. Angel of death. Let's somebody like a divine person who is taking care of you when you leave this world. So a small little boy happens to visit the abode of death. It's only a story, but there's a message behind the story. That's more important. So when he went there, the Lord of Death was absent. He had gone somewhere. He had to wait for 3 days. And the little boy waited for 3 days. On the 4th day, this angel came back and he said, I'm sorry, you have to wait for me all these 3 days. As a compensation, I will ask you, you can ask for 3 boons. So what's the first boon that you want? The boy said, I left my home in my journey to your place. I didn't get permission from my father. He will be angry with if I go back. So you please bless me. with this boon that when I go back to my home, my father will not scold me. And also it will be wonderful. Like a little child asking for candy. In fact, this first boon is defined and interpreted as the first stage in human evolution. You know what we want in our life? First, we want everything to be comfortable. We need a good house, good job, social security, in all the medical insurance that we're looking for. So, Shanta Sankalpa Sumana Yadasyat Vedaman Gotama Ma Abhimurtyu to Prasutama Abhivadet Prasida Idat Trayanam Prathamam Varamani. I'm just quoting this just for being recorded. Somebody will be useful, right? So this particular Sanskrit statement tells you the little child is asking for this boon, the first boon. When I go back to my home, my father should not scold me. Everything will be wonderful in my home, family. The first stage in human evolution, we want a good life in this world. But little boy was very intelligent. He thought of this. Well, now I have got a guarantee I have all the comfortable things in this world. But one day I will disappear from this world. I don't know what will happen to me when the body is pushed the tube. You can carry with you your bank balance, your checkbook and fountain pen. So it will end of everything. So I want something more. I want to enjoy in heaven. I want to have all these enjoyments in heaven. So please give me that boon, second boon. So the Lord of Death gave him the second boon also. Sattum agdim sorgam adhyeshimurtya prabruhitam sadadanaya mahyam sorgadhana amrutatvam bhajande etat trayanam dvitiyam varamani. The second boon I'm asking. When I die, I should be able to enjoy all these comforts in the heaven. This is the second boon I'm looking for. And he gave the second boon. The third boon was this. There's a very profound, that's the ultimate boon, the most profound message of this Katha Upanishad. This little boy is asking the question. Well, I have everything wonderful in this world. I will be able to enjoy even after death. But what's the real meaning of human existence? Where do we come from? Where are we going? And what is the ultimate goal of human existence? So when this boy asked this question, the angel, the Lord of Death, well, he was not very happy. He wanted to test this boy. Is he really ready for the supreme wisdom that he is asking for? Because ultimate spiritual wisdom is much more profound than a boon that helps you to live a happy life in this world or to continue enjoying the same happiness after death. So the Yama, the angel tests this boy. Finally, Yama tells him, okay, I shall teach you the truth. He says, the ultimate truth is this. And the verse is this, Anoraniyan Mahato Mahiyan Atma Sijendo Nikadam Gukayam Tamakradu Pashyadi Veda Chogaha Dhadu Prasadan Mahimanam Atmanaka. The meaning is this, very simple, is this. God, the God you're looking for, you're seeking, He lives in the hearts of everyone as the divine spark present in everyone. When you live a happy life, when you practice compassion, when you practice unselfishness, when you love everyone around you, when you have no hatred for anyone, when you actually become a good human being, then you will experience the presence of the divine spark within you. The ultimate teaching is this. When we practice meditation, compassion, love, broad-mindedness, all these values, irrespective of the fact whether you believe in God or not. That's very interesting. From a Vedantic perspective, even a non-believer in God can become spiritual because spirituality essentially means becoming an ideal good human being. And at the philosophical level, this is possible when you feel total identity and oneness with everyone around you. This is very, very important. That's why in interfaith system, at the beginning we may discuss, you are different from your path is different from mine. Okay, I will tolerate you. Fine. That is good, actually. That's much better than anything else. If you tell somebody, well, you're wrong, I'm the only one who is correct, but I won't quarrel with you. That is certainly very good, but not the highest. The highest level of this toleration is, well, your path is different from my path. That doesn't mean that you're wrong, I'm right, I'm the only one who is right. See, A and B, let's say, if you are A and I am B, it doesn't mean that we are mutually fighting with each other. A and B can be two different approaches to the same goal, to the same path. The same divine reality, whom we call God or Atman, or any name that you call any tradition, it manifests in so many different ways, in so many cultural traditions, so many national traditions. According to Vivekananda, every nation, every race, every society in the world has some unique contribution to make the totality of human civilization. Because every religion is an expression of the same reality from a different angle. And we can really reach this level of spiritual convergence or spirituality by evolving further and further. Even everyday secular activity can be converted into a tool for this spiritual growth. In Vedantic tradition, mind is often compared to a mirror. Suppose a mirror is full of dust. You can't see a clear reflection on the mirror. You have to take a piece of cloth, you have to wipe the dust off the mirror. And then mirror begins to reflect the same reality. So the mirror is not reflecting the sunlight, is because there is dust on the mirror surface. But it's needed to remove the dust. When you remove the dust, the mirror begins to reflect sunlight clearly. And how to remove this dust? Vedanta tells you that every activity can be a way of removing this dust. Whatever we do, and not just spiritual activity alone, any kind of secular activity. As I mentioned earlier, you may be a doctor working in a hospital, you may be a security person guarding a place, you may be a soldier fighting for the country, for the protection of your society. All these activities can be done in a spiritual way. Every activity has the potential to become an act of worship. It is the attitude with which we do that becomes, that makes it the act of worship. Sometimes you have to remember, even the so-called act of violence can be a spiritual activity. You'll be surprised when I tell you. I can give you an example. Look at the Second World War. In 1938, there was this Treaty of Appeasement, 1930 September. Germany was the most powerful, technologically, militarily, scientifically, most advanced nation in Europe. So already he was becoming a terrible dictator. At that time, Neville Chamberlain, Mussolini, Hitler, and the French President Diderot, they all convened in Munich. It's called the Munich Treaty, called Treaty of Appeasement, 1938. So there was this treaty agreement, and Neville Chamberlain thought that by appeasing Hitler, by taking recourse to non-violence, he can avoid the problem. You know the result? Hitler felt emboldened, encouraged, and within months he attacked Czechoslovakia. The certain land was annexed to Germany, and that's the beginning of the Second World War. The treaty between Ribbentrop and Molotov. Molotov was the Soviet foreign minister, and Ribbentrop was the German foreign minister. Suppose France and England had stood together and stopped Hitler, there would be no Second World War. So did you find here non-violence was helpful? When Neville Chamberlain returned to London airport, he proclaimed, "We have achieved peace in this generation." And what was that peace? It caused the death of almost 90 million people in the Second World War. So Lord Krishna makes a very interesting statement, the way for world peace. So Dharma is defined. So what he says is, any activity, spiritual or secular, any action, spiritual or secular, that protects humanity, that preserves humanity, that protects dharma, that saves others, that is helpful to humanity, that is the real meaning of dharma. And the main purpose of dharma is to preserve peace in this world. So you cannot really clearly define that ahimsa paramo dharma. It's a great, see, non-violence is the highest virtue. But non-violence practiced by Neville Chamberlain was not a very high, not a wonderful thing, because it led to the Second World War. I'm giving some examples and giving broader perspective, going beyond theology and philosophy. What it means is this: when we talk about religion and spirituality, the first thing is we should always defend truth, dharma, and virtue. So just a great ideal alone cannot guarantee preservation of human civilization. Standing for a higher virtue, standing for world peace also involves being proactive for the preservation of peace in this world. That's what Buddha actually taught. That's what Lord Krishna taught. There are many statements in the Mahabharata which I don't want to refer to. I'm giving a series of lectures for Stanford University Hindu Student Association Mahabharata. What it means is this: the highest virtue for humanity is an act of peace, act of worship, act of spirituality that eventually preserves and protects and sustains humanity. That's the ultimate purpose of dharma and peace. And coming to our own subject, I would say every religion contains this higher truth. Jesus Christ, again, Buddha, Jesus Christ, Zoroaster or Hindu sages, they all spoke of the same ultimate truth. But in modern times, what is needed is to practice this peace in our own heart, not through inaction, but rather identifying with the cause of the whole humanity. Whole world peace should be our ideal. That is the real meaning of Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam. So in that case, if you imagine, if you think of the evolution of interfaith traditions, you find every interfaith activity is an attempt to sustain and protect world peace. I have already given a picture of the evolution right from Vedic times to Emperor Ashoka, Akbar, and again the great work done by Americans in 1893. For the first time in the history of the world, all world religions were brought together on a single platform. And Henry Barrows, in his introduction, he says, to proclaim the truth that all religions are so many valid paths leading to the same goal. If you ever wonder why Vivekananda became a celebrity overnight in Chicago Parliament Religion, it's very interesting. I can refer to that, then I should conclude. If you look at Vivekananda's Chicago address, you find a few important things which are closely linked to the very concept of interfaith spirituality, interfaith relation. First, Vivekananda talks about the emigration of different people to India, the Zoroastrians, the Parsians, and maybe, I don't know whether historically whether you are aware of this or not, the second oldest Muslim masjid is in India. It was built in 625, just at the time of Prophet Muhammad. Islam came to India not through Afghanistan, Iran and Pakistan or other places. It came through trade routes. The Arabs were having trade routes to India, and they used to bring dates, and when Islam emerged, they continued coming, and the local Raja gave them a place to build their masjid that still stands today. It's called Chairman Perumal, 625. Around that time, when Prophet Muhammad was still alive. And before that, the Jewish immigrants, Christians. I don't know how many of you are aware of this not. The impact of this statement that I mentioned earlier, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. The first Christian immigration to India took place in 52 AD. And there are churches that still continue to exist in India that go back to 1st and 2nd century AD. You have to remember, this was almost 290 years before the first Council of Nicaea. 325 AD was the Council of Nicaea. 325 AD, when Emperor Constantine proclaimed Christianity as a religion of Roman Empire. So almost 280 years before that, Christians have already reached India. Why were they accepted and welcomed? Again, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. So this statement, truth is one, but sages call it by different names. That idea and its impact continues to survive at our own times. Even in 1959, when Tibet was overrun by Chinese, Dalai Lama came to India. He said the most important place for Buddhist learning in Asia is Dharmashala in 1959. So the idea that truth is one, but sages call it by different names. And truth is one can be understood only when we realize truth is spiritual experience and not rituals. The same rituals you don't find in every religion. Every religion is different from every other religion in terms of rituals, dogmas, doctrines. But the spiritual experience of a Christ, the spiritual experience of a Buddha, the spiritual experience of a Sri Ramakrishna or a Shankaracharya will be the same. From that higher perspective, when you reach the top of the hill, you look down, you find there are so many roads that lead to the top of the hill. But you don't see this unless you reach the top of the hill. Before that, if you look around, you don't find anyone else traveling to the top of the hill. The top of the hill is experience. That is spirituality. So from that spiritual perspective, the world is one, humanity is one. That's what we need to emphasize today. Differences are there. In fact, we should be able to celebrate differences. We should not think in terms of complete uniformity of everything. Impossible. But behind these differences and diversities, there is this thread of unity based on spiritual experience. That's why I said earlier, the language in which Buddha spoke was different from the language of Christ. The language of Jewish prophets, the language of Zoroaster, totally different from the language of Buddha, Christ, or Indian sages. But the spiritual experience, that was the same, expressed in different languages. And those prophets were the products of their times. And they also brought their own paradigm. But the essence was the same. At the experience level, everything is the same. Everything is the same, expressed in different languages. This is the essence of spiritual convergence. And I think this idea should be emphasized more and more, not only in spirituality and religion, but in culture, in values. In all traditions, we have to accept there are diversities, there are differences, and we should be able to celebrate and enjoy differences. At the same time, we'll be able to enjoy differences only when we see the thread of unity and oneness within and beyond these differences. Otherwise, every different thing becomes an island. It's not an island. There's a connecting spiritual link which put them all together like a garland, everything put together by the thread of spiritual experience. So I have just tried to give a general idea of the subject. And thank you very much for coming here and being part of this important event. Thank you. Namaste.
This morning reminds me of a well-known quote, when the student is ready, the teacher arrives. So as I was observing everybody so intensely watching, it gives me a sense of satisfaction that I'm volunteering for the right cause. So, Swamiji, thank you so much for the insightful talk. Talking about when the student is ready, the teacher arrives. I want to reflect upon my own journey. I'm here more as a student, and I've considered this blessing of Sri Ramakrishna that I got an opportunity to be the host. And it was not planned to be, I was supposed to be the full host for the whole morning. I was supposed to give just a 5 minutes welcome speech. But Swami talked about Katha Upanishad. And I have been associated with the Ramakrishna order since my high school days. But my intense association started only 10 years ago. And for that intense association to start, I had to be ready and the teacher has to come. And that teacher was sent to me by Sri Ramakrishna in the form of Swami Tattwamayananda. I am deeply grateful for his mentorship, guidance, compassion, and compassion through scolding as well. He scolded me, you're getting too spiritual. You need to know how to live in this imperfect world. He has guided me on so many things. And every time I get scolded in a very compassionate way, I use my drive back home to reflect upon what he really meant. And there is not even a single time I have felt that, I use the word scolding in a very colloquial way, it has been inappropriate. So the Katha Upanishad Swami talked about, I thought evolution is only going to the good temple praying. That was my upbringing till then, as someone who grew up in religious household. And when Swami talked about Katha Upanishad 10 years ago, that was the first time for me somebody had explained spiritual scripture. And at that time, Swami spent a lot of time on the importance of developing the intellect to guide your mind. There's a whole analogy of the chariot in Katha Upanishad. And I said, wow, that is the depth of the spiritual scriptures. I was thinking it's going to the temple, pray, 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 and be a nice boy. And that's what I thought was evolution. And then what do I do next? Like, we are all here, wonderful lectures. And I was researching about Katha Upanishad. There is one Sanskrit verse that really resonates with me. And as an ardent student of Swami Tattwamayananda, I have to give a Sanskrit quote. It's Jnanat evatu kaivalyam prapyate ena muchyate. It primarily says only through knowledge that you find liberation. That caught me. What does it mean, really? That means I wanted to go on a serious study of the scriptures. And that Katha Upanishad lecture inspired me to go on a serious study of lectures. I've gone through Vivek Chudamani, Patanjali Yoga Sutra Swami gave for almost a year and a half. Of course, Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam stories, so many of them. And as I shared in the morning, I was wondering, okay, I studied, today we have come and heard a lecture. What do we do after this? Is it a dot in the whiteboard? Where are the dots connecting? That's the reason I went through this whole series of a systematic study. Then we learn a lot from fellow students. I have to be grateful to one of our fellow devotees who was a mathematician from Stanford, a PhD in maths. I had to mention that. I asked him during a dinner conversation, I stay at the old temple, how do I really get the essence of this? And Swami has spoken that in many lectures. Swami, he is the one who explained to me. He was 20 years, 10 years, 15 years younger to me. He told me about Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. He explained. I had heard it in the lectures, but he communicated why it is important to reflect. Reflect and assimilate it. And reflect, I ask the questions again and again. So I highly encourage you to come afternoon for the Q&A session. And it is my sincere prayer to Sri Ramakrishna that he has given me the path through Swami Tattwamayananda on this path, and I feel ever grateful for that. And in today's theme of one world, many paths, I only pray that you find your own unique path. So there is no one path, and all the three speakers have guided us so very well. And I considered it, the whole intense core of me is God has no religion. I truly believe that. In my elementary school, one of my best friends was a Muslim, and I used to be in the Bible study group, going to a Catholic school. And at home, I was brought up religiously. So today's lecture, today's theme and the opportunity to be here is a blessing that Sri Ramakrishna bestowed upon me. And I sincerely hope and pray that we all find our path.